Well, welcome everyone to our Fairfax November event. We've got Central Solutions is sponsoring our luncheon today, and in a few minutes I'll have Paul Naberga come on and say some talk about Central Solutions and what's going on with them. They've been very busy this year with COVID, and I'm just going to make a few announcements. First, I want to remind everyone to use your little, you know how you have your chat button? So normally when we be in person at a luncheon, you could go and stand up and introduce yourself and what company you're with. So now what we do is just, if you want to hit on your chat button, you can introduce yourself, say your name and what your company you're with and anything you want to say, so people can kind of see that. So it's a good way to introduce ourselves. A few Fairfax updates. There's the fire station. I don't know if all of you recall, but I'll be sending out an email on this. The Fairfax Fire Station was closed July 23rd. The city decided for budget reasons that they needed to move our fire personnel and equipment out to a new station in Piper that was being built and opened, and FIA and all of the businesses, most of the businesses all opposed it, just because we're such a highly hazardous and populated small area. So unfortunately, the commission voted to go ahead and close it, but we're following the numbers. And so once a quarter, the fire chief and Doug Bach, the county administrator, and others, we all meet and discuss what the response, how long takes for them to respond to any emergencies in Fairfax. There's a guideline that around the country, it's an FPA that they're supposed to follow. We got our first results back, and over in the first 2 months since closing our station, they have not met those response times 44 to 46% of the time, and they should be meeting them 90% of the time. So they're concerned. The fire union did do some picketing. I don't know if any of you saw on the news last Friday, because they would like to see the Fairfax Fire Station reopened. So that's we're going to continue to stay on top of that. And we will be meeting again with Doug Bach, the fire chief, and others, and see what the next quarter results are. We've been told by the fire chief that they've made some changes and corrections, and that the response time should get in line with what they're supposed to be. So
okay, no, that's something you can
the Fairfax district banners, those will be going up soon. I'm just waiting. One of the companies in Fairfax, Midwest Signs, they're going to be putting them up for us, and they had a problem with their truck that's got the bucket on it to put the signs up. So hopefully you'll be seeing those up within a few weeks. They're pretty cool looking, so I'm excited to get them up. Signage, our Fairfax signage, I don't know if you remember. Again, I'm going to capture this in email, so you'll be able to, I'll have pictures. We had the monument signage that showed everyone, the beginning of this year and last year. Gold Evans, they came up with a great design with part of our Fairfax committee. And we now have contractors in place for the design build company. And that's just gotten finalized. We're going to have 3 of the tower signs put up. And depending on with winter weather, we'll see how long it could be next spring, but they'll start building the signage and the install maybe later, but we'll keep you all informed on that. So that's exciting. It will be the first time in our district's almost 100 years that we will have actual signage that says Fairfax. And it's really cool signage. I don't know if you recall, it's got the B-25 bomber on top of it. And Fairfax, and it's going to light up, and so our group's excited. Worked hard on this for quite a while, and I cannot wait until they're up. And I know Mary Lou, who's one of the B-25 Rosie Riveters, who's in her 90s, has been Melissa, we're going to get that up. You got to get that up while I'm still alive. I'm like, I know, we're pushing on it. So she'll be excited too, as many others. Okay, so I think that's all I have for announcements. So I'm going to, in just a minute, introduce Paul Naberga with Central Solutions, who's our sponsor. And then after that, I'm going to introduce John Latenzer, who is on the Fairfax board as our president for many years, and he is the one that arranged our speaker, Dave Helling, with the Casey Star today. So Paul, I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and Paul Naberga, if you want to go ahead and step in. I think you're here somewhere.
Sure, I don't know what I need to do to that other than start talking.
There you are. Oh wait, I think you can. I'm gonna change it so you're.
Well, I'm going to jump into the PowerPoint thing real quick anyway, so I don't know that it matters. And I promise I will be quick. Let me start by thanking Dave Helling for being here today. Dave, I had a chance to listen to you and John Holt and Kevin Keatsman talk the other day, and it was civil and respectful. You all gave me hope. So thank you for that. I enjoyed it very much. I want to first state that I'm going to attempt to share my presentation, which will be brief. So that's a skill set I'm still working on. So if I lose everybody and you see a giant mushroom cloud, I'll be back in just a moment. Let's see how this works here. There we go. Does that work?
Yeah.
Not going. There we go. Okay. So hopefully we are building there here in beautiful Fairfax. Are we good, Melissa?
We're good. You're on.
All right. I'm moving forward then. Thank you all. I'm going to spend just a quick 5 to 7 minutes talking about Central Solutions. Some of you are familiar with us, others not. So let me just provide a brief overview and share with you some of the more unusual aspects of our company. We are a manufacturer of skincare and infection control offerings. I'll go into more detail about the product mix in a moment. One thing that is unusual is that we're in our 95th year of same family ownership. It's quite a story. And we've been located here in Fairfax since 1958. That's 62 years here on the Kansas side of the state line. Like any family business, there is a story that I'll share with you. I'll cover 95 years in 60 seconds. Our story begins, before I do that, let me talk about the FIA. Because we have been here for 62 years, we are strong proponents of Wyandotte County and specifically the Fairfax Industrial Association. We're active on the board, we're active with the Fairfax Festival, and so it's very very meaningful to us that you all would spend the next hour or so with us. So thank you for that. If you have any questions about FIA and for whatever reason you can't get a hold of Melissa, please feel free to reach out to me. As I was saying, every family business has a story. Ours starts here. It's a beautiful little island called Madeira. It's a Portuguese island off the coast of Morocco. It's important to our story because it's also the birthplace of the man there on the left. That is my grandfather, Frank Naberga. The gentleman next to him is my great uncle, one of his 3 siblings, the only sibling to come and join him in the United States. 2 of the brothers stayed on the island, so even today we have cousins there and we communicate back and forth. Their English is much better than my Portuguese. All I remember are the bad words that my grandfather taught me. But those 2 gentlemen there began a legacy for us. And now here we are 95 years later, 4 generations of same family ownership. So that 4th generation, by the way, we don't have many photos of all 4 generations together. This is the only one that I could find, but it's kind of fun. My grandfather's in the back on the right. That's my dad in the back on the left. The guy to the right is my brother Mike. He still works with us. His hair color is a little different now. And then the little boy in the chair at his first trade show is my nephew David, who's been with us for 20 years. So take a look at him because you'll see him here in 2020 in just a moment. So 4 generations launches us forward 95 years to 2020. today there are 4 grandsons and 4 great-grandsons. That little boy in the chair is in the back, in the middle there with the dark shirt and the white logo on his chest. That's my nephew David. He's grown up a little bit. Now, I was not a math major, but I think if you do the math, that's 8 Nabrigas under one roof. I'm pretty sure the unified government has some sort of ordinance limiting that. We haven't hit it yet. I'll keep you posted. We have another Nabriga showing up sometime here in early 2021, so that'll put 9 of us. Quite the record. We haven't killed each other yet, but hopefully we will get along surprisingly well. So moving forward very quickly, just to give you an idea of our product mix, everything we produce is under one roof right here in Fairfax. It's a 168,000 square foot facility. We are FDA and EPA registered, meaning that we make everything under current good manufacturing practices. Our facility also includes 4 fully integrated labs, including a wet chemistry lab, analytical lab, microbiology, and a research and development lab. That's most of our day crew there, although we have QA people that are out on the floor. Like all of us here at Central Solutions, they've been very busy, particularly so. There are a bunch of good people in there. Talking a little bit about our product mix. We serve primarily the human health care market. We have some animal health offerings as well, and some niche markets that we serve, but it's almost all human health care. So as you might imagine, it's been very busy for us because we make hand sanitizer, as well as soaps, lotions, shampoos, disinfectants, surgical instrument reprocessing liquids. We do a great deal of those products under our branded label as well as private label offerings. So if you're at your physician's office here in Kansas City or anywhere in the United States, there's a pretty good chance that somewhere in that office is one of our products. It just may not have our name on it. So very quickly, the pandemic has certainly impacted us. We went through SARS in 2003, H1N1 in 2011, but neither one was like this. There's been a global supply chain disruption that continues on, and there's been some challenges. Now, that being said, we're very fortunate, very blessed to have products that can help. And another positive aspect of this, in addition to the massive demand spike for our products, is that our employee base has jumped up from 65 to 110 employees. We weren't planning on that. We didn't know that that new number would stick around, but it sure seems to be the case because healthcare has new guidelines requiring the use of infection control topicals. So we're glad to serve our community by being able to hire more people. One thing to note about our employee base is that a large percentage of them are born outside the United States. And we like that because it's a nod to our grandfather who was an immigrant and came to America to make a better life for himself. Just to give you a little bit of a visual, these flags represent the different countries and or languages represented within our walls. So if you ever walk through, and hopefully someday you can, once the pandemic's restrictions are lifted, it's kind of like walking through the United Nations General Assembly. It's a lot of fun. So looking at today, the impact does continue. One of the things that's been evident to us is that the public needs quality product from credible manufacturers. Never has it been more obvious to people that not all hand sanitizers are created equal. There's a lot of moonshine sanitizer out there that has served a helpful purpose. Unfortunately, it also sometimes can include ingredients that are not ideal. So part of our realization in the past 4 or 5 months has been that we need to up our game. And given that, we have initiated a capacity expansion project. That's an aerial view of our building here in Fairfax. I want to draw your attention to the far right or the south end, where we have underway the creation of a sub-facility dedicated to the production of hand sanitizer. Now that's in process right now. It won't be in full swing until probably February. But just to give you some scale, year to date, we have made enough hand sanitizer to fill about 14 million 4-ounce bottles. Once this capacity expansion project is done, our abilities will double. If you have a hard time envisioning a 4-ounce bottle, turn it into gallonage. That's about 430,000 gallons year to date. Or if you double that, would be about 900,000 gallons. So it's a lot of product, and yet there is a need for it. Quality products from a credible manufacturer. So that's a lot of information. I realize that. So I hope that's helpful to give you an idea of what we're doing. Please consider this an open invite. Once the pandemic restrictions are lifted, to come by and take a tour. We would welcome that. Again, thank you for supporting Fairfax. We're proud to be a part of the association and very proud to be born and raised right here in Kansas City. So with that, Melissa, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thanks so much for your 5 to 7 minutes. We're very grateful.
You do such a nice job, Paul.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you so
Thank
much.
you.
And this is what makes Fairfax so special, is we have so many of our businesses and we all know each other and have these relationships. So appreciate Central Solutions support. They're a big supporter of Fairfax. Hopefully we'll be back doing our festival next October. Anyways, it's just miss seeing everyone in person, but hopefully that vaccine is going to get out there and things are going to start getting better. But thank you, Paul. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to John Latenzer, who is going to introduce our guest speaker.
Thanks, Melissa. And thanks, Paul, for your story about your family business. It's always fascinating to hear about Central Solutions. I'll start off by saying I'm very appreciative to Dave for agreeing to be with us today. Dave spoke in front of our group, it's, I believe, 6 years ago, and everybody enjoyed the presentation. We have been fortunate that we've had so many interesting speakers at the Fairfax group over the years, local and national political figures, business leaders, sports leaders. I don't know that we've had anyone who had any more interesting presentation over the years than what Dave did several years ago. And I'll put a little heat on him that I know he'll do it again today. There's so many things that are in the news that are current that we're anxious to hear Dave's views on. I'll say that Dave and I have a little common connection in Creighton University. Part of Dave's background is he attended Creighton University, served as a student body president at Creighton University. My connection to Creighton is I had the privilege to pay for 3 children to go through Creighton University. So I'm still working those debts off. It's the equivalent of paying for several weddings, I think, for your daughters. But wonderful school. Dave served as the student body president while he was there. And from there, it appears that Dave's career took him through some smaller towns, smaller cities in Nebraska. He worked his way through those down to Wichita, and then eventually back to the Kansas City area. Dave serves today on the editorial board at the Kansas City Star, has for the past several years. I personally always enjoy reading his column and look forward to that. I also have enjoyed seeing Dave as he appears so many times around town on local media, different stories. Dave has just finished this morning recording or appearing on a public TV broadcast. He's got another similar thing to do apparently later in the day. And I suppose before the day's over, if I understood Dave, he's got to pound out an editorial column for his weekly column at the newspaper. So we thank Dave very much for being here. And at that point, I'm going to turn it over to Dave because he's the guy we came to listen to today. So thank you, Dave, for coming.
Well, John, thanks for that. And thanks for sending your hard-earned dollars to Creighton University. When I was a student there, the cost was a tad lower. I graduated in 1977. So although in real dollars, it might have been as expensive as well, I certainly know that my father and I working together to pay that bill strained at times to go to a private school. But I love my time there and I learned a lot. And it's great to be with you and with all the folks at the Fairfax Industrial Association again. I'll tell a quick story and then talk a little bit about politics, a little bit about the newspaper, and then take whatever questions you might want to have. The story is this: when the COVID emergency started back in the spring and we were all told to sort of stay at home and work from home as much as possible, I was happy to do that. But I also said to my wife, I need to find something that's not news related, just as a pastime. If we're going to be stuck in the house for some time, maybe there are other things to do other than read books and the stuff that you normally do. And so I decided I had not built a plastic model airplane since I was like 12. So I said, you know what, that might be fun. I'm an old man. Let's see if I could still put a plastic model together. So I ordered one. It was delivered. I spent most of the spring putting it together. Turned out to be a B-25 airplane. Now, those of you who are smiling know why that's important. Because I did some research and realized the B-25 was built in Fairfax, like 6,000 of them. So accidentally, maybe, I built an airplane that was not only fun to do, but also reminded me a little bit of local history and the importance of Fairfax to our community. So it's a pleasure again to be before this group and to remind myself and everyone how important Fairfax remains in Kansas City's economy. Let me talk a little bit about what I think we saw on November 3rd and what we may see going forward. I'm going to assume, for the sake of argument, that when all the pushing and shoving is over, that Joe Biden will be inaugurated as the next president. I've just been around politics too long to believe that recounts or allegations of ballot problems can move the numbers enough to change the outcome in the presidential election. And so I think when all is said and done, Joe Biden will be the president inaugurated on the 20th. And a lot of people have remarked about how polarized the country seems to be and dug in its points of view, left and right, and there doesn't seem to be much of a middle ground anymore. And I think all of that is true, and the results sort of certainly illustrated that on election night, primarily because the Republican Party did far better than expected on almost every race except the presidential race, that almost certainly they'll retain control of the Senate. They picked up seats in the U.S. House. They'll continue to control legislatures with supermajorities in Kansas and Missouri. Republicans won going away in Missouri races. Barb Boyer was supposed to be competitive in Kansas. It did not turn out to be the case. So Republicans did well down ballot. Democrats did well at the top of the ballot. It is not news to this group that our country is fairly split in ways that seem more aggressive than they ever have in my career covering politics. But what I don't think a lot of people have paid attention to is the fact that split may guarantee, at least for some time into the future, a stalemate in our politics. The idea that Joe Biden can come in and turn over the world overnight is probably overblown. I think almost certainly Republicans will control the U.S. Senate when all is said and done. That will take things like adding judges to the Supreme Court or giving statehood to Puerto Rico or the District of Columbia. All that will be on the sidelines. Maybe Joe Biden will be happy with that, frankly, because if the Democrats do take over, it might be a fight that they really don't want to have. I do think, however, that there will be some real efforts, and should be real efforts, to address COVID in the new Congress and with the new president, because the threat, as you all know, and many of your businesses, of course, have had to deal with this, not only in the Central Solutions that we just heard from, of course, but all of manufacturing has had to sort of figure out how to proceed under COVID. For whatever reason, we are reaching an enormous spike in that disease. And I think the impetus to try and do something in the new Congress will be enormous, and the incentives to compromise will be high for both Democrats and Republicans. But anything beyond that, healthcare reform, even infrastructure repairs to some degree, I think are going to be extraordinarily difficult, because what in essence the voters have said is we kind of like stalemate. It isn't the country's politics, again, taking the presidency off the table, which, but just take that off the table for a second. The government today isn't appreciably different than it was on November 2nd. The same people are in control. Incumbents won at a very high clip. The majorities in local legislatures, state legislatures, and the national legislature are very similar to what they were before, with a slight Republican pickup. So I think stalemate is what we're looking at for the next year to year and a half, except on COVID. I do think that there will be some real bipartisan effort to deal with whatever we think COVID has been and how to get rid of it. Let me talk a little bit about the outcome in both states. I don't think anyone was, let's start in Kansas since this is the Fairfax Industrial Association. I don't think anyone was surprised at the outcome in Kansas. We were stunned by the margin. I think we all went into the Senate race thinking that on election day that maybe it was a 3 or 4 point margin for Roger Marshall. It turned out to be much more than that. It turned out to be a margin very similar to the margin that Pat Roberts had over Greg Orman 6 years ago. I think that's a testimony to the strength of the Republican Party in Kansas, particularly outstate Kansas, but also Wichita, and the movement of what I call sort of middle-class voters, high school educated voters, labor unions, once reliably Democratic. That shift over to the right is very pronounced in places like Wichita, and that makes it extraordinarily difficult for Democrats in the state. And I think we saw evidence of that November 3rd. Now, Sharice Davids won by 9 points in the 3rd district, which of course includes Wyandotte County. But even there, her margin shrunk just a little bit, and the shift, if you will, of Johnson County to the left, while Sedgwick County is going to the right, is also a phenomenon we need to pay attention to. But hers is the exception, really, that proves the rule. The legislatures in both states remain supermajorities for the Republican Party in Kansas. I think going forward, that's going to make life very difficult for Laura Kelly, who faces the voters in 2 years. The disincentives for Republicans to sort of join her on any major initiatives will be very high. And so I think the likelihood of continued pressure on the governor from the state legislature will continue in Kansas. I think that has a practical effect on Medicaid expansion, which I don't think is going to happen now. But it also will have a big role, and you guys in Fairfax know this, it will have a huge role in redistricting. And there will be enormous pressure. I talked about this on another program earlier in the week. There will be enormous pressure, I think, to move Wyandotte County out of the 3rd district. As you may remember, 10 years ago, there was a move, or at least some suggestion, of making Wyandotte County part of the 1st district, and to wrap the 1st district from western Kansas all the way around through Atchison and Leavenworth down into Wyandotte County. There was enormous pushback against that, and I don't think that's likely, but you can see a situation in which Wyandotte County gets added in either to the 2nd district or maybe even the 1st if they go at it from that direction. So I think all of the people in Fairfax will need to pay enormous attention to redistricting. And remember, Laura Kelly will not be able to veto, presumably, any new map that comes out from the legislature. Or at least they'll be able to override any veto, which makes a court challenge less likely. So the days of the 3rd district, including Wyandotte County and Johnson County, may be numbered. There's a lot of talk of splitting Johnson County into 2 congressional districts, where you could see a Wyandotte and northern half of Johnson County in, say, with Topeka, and southern Johnson County in with counties south to the Oklahoma border. That's a possibility. You'd have to do the math, but of the 4 districts in Kansas, I think the 3rd is under the most pressure. And the idea of doing something that would directly affect the way Wyandotte County is represented in Washington is very high. So I think the folks certainly in the Fairfax district and the local government will need to pay attention to that. Skip over to Missouri real quick. Again, no real surprises. The margins were stunning. Races we thought were 4 or 5 point races turned out to be 15 or 20. Again, all lean toward Republicans, both in the legislature and at statewide races. And I don't think that that's likely to change anytime soon. In that state, we were surprised that Amendment 3 passed. That's the so-called Clean Missouri Amendment, which would have changed the way they do state districts in Missouri. Voters threw that out 2 years after approving it. I think that was a bit of a surprise. But other than that, I don't think, and Republican control of the government, full government, I don't think there were any great surprises in Missouri. One other thing I would note from the elections, and then I want to talk a little bit about what's going on at the newspaper and media, and then questions. I think it was very encouraging to me anyway that 2020 showed an enormous emergence, if you will, of women candidates. I think of the 8 House seats Republicans have picked up, 7 were women candidates. We had 2 women running in the 3rd district. A woman was the Democratic candidate for governor in Missouri. I think, and for state legislative races, certainly. I told somebody this yesterday, I think we did 22 endorsements in the general election at the Star. Math may be off a little bit, but 22 endorsements of candidates for state legislative races and others. 2 were of white men, just 2. The others included, black candidates, women candidates, some of them most of them extraordinarily focused and good candidates. And I think that's all to the good. I think that diversity of campaigns and candidates is an important trend. And it's time to get some new voices. I've said this for some time, to get some new voices in our political systems, and that's what we're doing. Okay, let me talk a little bit about the Kansas City Star and then open up for questions. For those who didn't see this story in the Star or read about it online, the Star announced this week that it is closing its operations in the big green building downtown and doing 2 things. First, we're looking for new office space. And by the way, if you have any, let us know, because we haven't figured out where we're moving to yet. We are now housed in the basement of the big green building, although most of us have not been in the newsroom for months and don't look to go back for some time. But nevertheless, we are looking for new office space. But the more important thing is that we are closing the printing plant and printing the newspaper in Des Moines. And there's no real way, I mean, I've just got to be honest, there's no real way to sugarcoat that. I mean, it is a sad day. The Star has been printed in Kansas City for 140 years, and the idea that it would be printed in another community is not something you can sugarcoat or sort of talk people out of. It's just something in a perfect world you would not see happen. But the people who own the Kansas City Star, and we're owned by a hedge fund now because of our earlier bankruptcy, are wholly committed to a digital transition. They really think that the future for us lies in providing our news product online to subscribers and to the eventual end of the print edition. And so for some time, the print copy has been under pressure. When I started at the Star, we always talked about deadlines and when can it get in I started in 2005, when can we get things into the paper? And now when stories are prepared for the print edition I don't want to say an afterthought, but it is not the driver. The driver is how quickly can we write, how quickly can we get it online, how can we link people to it, promote it, get people to read it online, and then get people to subscribe to the online edition. That's very disappointing in some ways to traditionalists like me, but it's no secret to this group or to any group that the newspaper business, other than in New York and maybe in Washington, D.C., is under enormous pressure, not so much from people in the Fairfax Industrial Association. I mean, you folks may still take the paper, as I do, but younger readers just do not get their news from printed newspapers. and they're not subscribing. Advertisers are not advertising. That's not where they feel like they can reach their customers. And by the way, in the middle of all of this and our bankruptcy and all these pressures, let's dump a pandemic in which people don't want to go shopping and don't want to go to restaurants and don't do any of the things that they used to turn to their newspaper for guidance to do. So we're under enormous pressure. We will save some millions of dollars by closing the printing operation. And that money, we were told yesterday by our editor, will be used to beef up news gathering, which remains our primary mission, of course, and the thing that we want to do. But there's no way to say that those of us who like the newspaper on print can be happy with this change, or that it doesn't mean anything, or that it's just a formality. It is not. It's an important thing. But we remain committed, and this is where I sort of wave the STARS flag. We remain committed to being the best news provider we can be. And we're not what we once were. We don't have a bureau in Kansas City, Kansas. We don't have reporters throughout the community. We have to pick and choose a bit more, but we are still working hard to do the best we can with the resources we can. We still think we provide the best news product in Kansas City. And that will continue for some time, but it's going to look and feel very different than it once did. So with that, again, my great appreciation for the invitation today, and my thanks for listening to my discussion of what just happened. And John, we'll open it up for any questions or observations you'd like to have me respond to.
Dave, I'll start off with one, and and Melissa, if I'm doing this different than the normal protocol, just let me know. But
Nope, you're good.
so Dave, tell us a little bit about, most of us who read the Star, one of the things we always look at is the editorial page. So tell us a little bit about the process on how the Star takes a position on certain things. Tell us how that editorial staff comes to these positions that then an editorial is written. And clearly the Star has their editorial that is unnamed, written by an unnamed person, as well as the various members of the board write a column under their own byline. But
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit behind the scenes.
Happy to do so. I've been on the editorial board now for about 4 years after a long career in just straight news. And so it was a bit of an adjustment for me to understand how this process works. But in a nutshell, we have a board that consists of basically 4 writers: Dave Helling, Michael Ryan, Melinda Hindenburger, and Toriana Porter. Then we have a 5th member, Derek Donovan, who sort of helps us technically and logistically and organizes all of our work into something that can get into the paper. And then Colleen McCain Nelson, who is our editor, the vice president of opinion, and the vice president of opinion for all of McClatchy, which means that she has some responsibility for the other newspapers in the chain. We meet every morning at 9:30. We do it virtually now. We used to do it in person, but we meet every morning. And we just have a sort of a free-flowing discussion of 2 things. First, the news of the day, what we've seen, what we've heard, what stories the paper has written, what's out there in the discussion, if you will. What do we want to say about COVID or taxes or other issues? We limit ourselves to local and state issues only. We didn't endorse for president. You may have noticed that we didn't pick Donald Trump or Joe Biden because we don't think we can add anything to that discussion. Plenty of people are writing about the presidential race. So we try to limit ourselves to Missouri, Kansas, and the Kansas City region. So we'll talk about local stories, local issues. And then to a degree that's a bit unusual for an editorial board, we also talk about stories that we as editorial board members have worked on our own, almost like regular journalists. I have a column in the bin right now on the discussion surrounding the East Side sales tax in Kansas City, Missouri, which was passed in 2017. There are some problems that are cropping up with that. We haven't written about that on the news side in months, but I've been told some things, and so I report it like a normal journalist would. And then we discuss for that and for the first, item in terms of what else we've written. John, we just talk about our views. What do we think? What does this mean? What should we say? What can we say? And then we see if there's a consensus, if there's an agreement among the 6 of us that we should say X or Y about a subject, then we agree on that, and then it's assigned to one reporter or another to flesh out and to write and to do some reporting on. Sometimes there are disagreements. Michael Ryan, who's on the board, is a great guy and a fine writer. He tends to be a bit more conservative in his views of politics and government, and so he'll have an alternative view that we'll consider. If we can reach a consensus, then that's that. We understand this is what we think we feel about COVID, and this is what we want to say about it, and then it's written, it goes through the editing process. Sometimes, not often, but sometimes the draft is distributed to make sure everyone's on board, but since we're relatively busy, we don't do that quite as much as we'd like. And then she approves it and it's published. Sometimes there are issues that we can't reach consensus on, in which case we don't write an editorial and individual columnists may take up the cause. Like Michael might disagree with what we decide to say on the mayor, and so he'll write a column outlining his disagreement so that we make sure his voice gets into the paper as well as whatever the institutional voice is. And I'll just say this as an aside, I lobbied early on to have our names put on the editorials because it's not like I want another byline. But I do think it's, I argued it was important for people to attach one of our names to the editorial, but that's not really traditionally what papers have done. They say this is the voice of the paper and they don't really want individuals. And so that's the way we approach it. I have been told that people can sort of see what I'm writing just because of the style that I write at. But so we don't do that. Then the only difference when we do actual candidate endorsements is we interview candidates. We actually reach out to them. We probably did 40 or 50 interviews over Zoom for this election cycle to talk to them directly about issues we think about and are concerned about, and then have a discussion. And then in some cases, not all, but in some, perhaps most, we actually do take a show of hands. Who's for Sharice Davids? Who's for Amanda Atkins? And it's a vote. It's just a straight vote. If there's a tie, sometimes we'll back away from writing anything at all, or we'll leave it up to the editor to decide which way we need to go. Her vote is the most important. The publisher of the paper is nominally a member of the editorial board, but that structure is a little weird now, and we haven't had any interference one way or another from Mike Fannin, who's the publisher, or anyone. It really, the buck really stops with Colleen Nelson. So we'll take a vote, and then that editorial, John, is assigned. And we write it and put it up. We did make a policy decision early on that any candidate who declined to interview for us would not be endorsed, because we did feel like you can't endorse someone without having a chance to talk with him or her about what she thinks, and just rely on campaign ads or statements or speeches. We think we need to do a little more reporting than that. That turned out to be a bit of a problem for Republicans this year, because for whatever reason, Republicans were reluctant not only to meet with us, although certainly with us, but participate in debates. There was a real decision, I think, that from most Republicans, not all, but most, that their advantage lay in doing it another way, by talking to conservative media or just doing paid media or whatever. Their reliance on what they call, and sometimes we refer to ourselves as the mainstream media, that it was clear this year that there was a reluctance to engage on that level. And so a lot of times we were only able to interview the Democratic candidate. And at that point, if you're going to do an endorsement, you're kind of stuck. I would just say, wrapping up, that there is real discussion in our newsroom and other newsrooms, but certainly ours, whether we need to do endorsements at all. You know, whether there is still value in what the paper says about state legislative races, that isn't completely clear. That's a very traditional thing. And you know, we didn't do it this year, but there is some talk about, gosh, do we really need to go through all of this when they seem to have less and less value? That trigger has not been pulled, but that matter is under discussion. We do think we still have an important voice on city-related matters. We endorsed in the mayor's race, all the council races in Kansas City, Missouri. We were the sponsor of 6 major debates in the mayor's race in 2019. So we're still actively involved on that level, but congressional, Senate races, governor's races, we are considering whether that's helpful or not helpful. And of course, as I said, we did not endorse in the presidential race this year. I hope that explains how we do it. We're all friends. It can get a little testy at times, I must say. I mean, imagine meeting every morning to talk politics with your coworkers, with an understanding that whatever decision is reached can, you know, will end up in the newspaper. People, you know, that there are times when it can get a little aggressive, but never so aggressive that we've stopped speaking with each other or stomped out of the room or anything. It's just people have, you know, we're all type A's. And so that's why we're in this business. And the idea that and the other thing that's part of this, John, is, you know, Colleen has told us, and I think it's right, that if you're going to write opinion, you've got to be clear and bold in your opinion. We can't do sort of on the one hand this, on the other hand this editorials. You have to pick a side and make your case for your side. Otherwise, no one's going to read it. I mean, you know, the last time the Star, you know, it's a joke. Well, why don't we just say what a great Thanksgiving it is? No, we're not. You know, we need a clear point of view. And when you have a clear point of view, you can be a little more argumentative. But for the most part, the vast majority, that we are able to reach consensus on most things and go from there. I'm on chat if you want to type out a question too, or if you want to just raise your hand and do your thing.
Can I ask a question, Dave? This is
Sure.
Clayton.
Hi, Clayton.
Hey, hi, Dave. I know all bets are off during the Trump era politics, but can you explain, maybe over the years, why Kansas can elect a Democratic governor? We've done it a number of times, but we can't elect a U.S. senator to serve us in Washington.
Yeah, since
What's
the
deal?
Depression. Since
Yeah.
the Depression. Well, two things I'd observe. First, sort of, Clayton, sort of short term first. I think that string is going to go on for a long time now, because Barb Boyer had money. She was good. She had experience. You know, she's a quality candidate, and she couldn't get close to Roger Marshall. I think it's going to be enormously hard to talk any Democrat into running. You know, statewide races are not only expensive, they're exhausting. I mean, you've got to spend time in, you know, in Great Bend and other places. So it's going to be hard to get a Democrat to run for years and years to come. Jerry Moran is up in 2 years. I'd be surprised if any prominent Democrat decides to challenge him. I think the reason that you can elect Democrats to governor and not to be governor and not to be a senator is Kansans, like most people, see their governor as something different than a senator. They see their governor as an executive rather than a legislator. And so there are concrete things you expect from a governor. You expect performance on certain important agenda items: education, transportation, taxation, public safety, health. Yeah, those are particular yardsticks against which you can measure a governor. Did you fully fund the schools? Did you build new roads? Did you provide water to Western Kansas? Those things are all important. And so people are much more willing to make that decision on practical grounds. A U.S. senator, on the other hand, is much more philosophic, much more tribal, much more partisan. No one expects Roger Marshall to go to Washington and change Washington tomorrow. He's one of 100 votes in a divided Senate, in a divided government. And so the measuring stick for Senate candidates is much more partisan, I think, than it is for governor. You know, you just want your governor to do things. You want your senator to think things. And that's the difference. And I think when Kansans vote, Clayton, on legislative seats, they tend to vote in a more partisan, more philosophical way. So those would be my two observations. I just, you know, if the Dems had a couple of chances, Greg Orman as the independent 6 years ago, he was believed to be close to Pat Roberts, and Barb Bollier was believed to be close to Roger Marshall, and neither turned out to be the case. And we just saw evidence of that again, even, by the way, with the shift of Johnson County. You know, Johnson Countyans went for Barb Bollier, although not as much as they went for Sharice Davids and Joe Biden. But nevertheless, you know, if you've lived in this community for a long time, as I have, the idea that Johnson County going Democrat is pretty amazing. And yet, even with that boost, Democrats for Senate races are unable to even get close. So I think that's why, that it's much more partisan, much more philosophical than it is practical as it is with governor.
Thank you, Dave, for the
Thank you. Thanks, Clayton. Let me read a question here from, if I could, John, from the chat. Are journalists potentially dividing the country with opinions? Are they going too far? Both sides have made it a brainwashing tool. We think about, and that's from Valerie. We give some thought to that. I mean, whether our opinions can be more divisive than helpful. But opinion in this country is no longer restricted to the opinion page of your local newspaper. I mean, you can just go on Twitter, go on Facebook, any social media site. The exchange of ideas and views is wild, and I think adds to our polarization. It does certainly make fact-based discussions more difficult. It just does. We all have different views of the world, and we are now using those views to impose them on fact patterns and see certain things that we want to see. I think the recount is a good example of that. I mean, I had a conversation yesterday with some folks, and I've been around politics for a long time. Recounts can change votes at the margins, but thousands of votes don't flip in recounts. And yet there are those who just simply don't want to see that. So we're not the, you know, we're still a voice. We're still an important voice, but we're far from the only voice that people are hearing or listening to. And, you know, you are now able in this world, as you always were, but now we see it happening, of ignoring our voice. We don't care what the Star says, or MSNBC or Fox News or whatever. We can go to where our silo and figure it out. And so while we have some part in the polarization of the country, I think by far the biggest driver is the ability of both sides to use alternate channels to reach followers, to discuss issues on governmental issues. Remember, we're about 1,200 words a day in editorials. You know, Rush Limbaugh is on radio for 3 hours every day. And that voice is amplified across the country. So, you know, division is a real thing, and polarization is a real thing, and we are so dug into our views. And the Star and other mass media plays some role in that, but I don't think it's the most important role at all. So, Valerie, great question. Do you have anything else, John? Or I've got one other question here from Butch. Do you have someone else want to raise their hand? All right, let me try this one. From Butch, can you give us your perspective on moving Kauffman Stadium downtown? Yeah, I've written about this a few times. I don't know whether it's going to happen, but I don't see how it's going to happen. Building a downtown stadium in Kansas City would easily cost $750 million minimum. I mean, just the complicated, and maybe more. Some people think it might be $1 billion, but just as a starting place, $750 million bucks. First of all, if John Sherman has that kind of money, I'd prefer he spend it on players when we have a stadium. But he doesn't have, one assumes, enough money to do that on his own. And so there would have to be a major taxpayer contribution to it. And I just don't see any enthusiasm for that whatsoever. I just don't think voters in Kansas City would be willing. I mean, that's an enormous tax increase to come up with that kind of money. And I say this from long experience, the Chiefs are not going to stand by and let the community spend $750 million on the Royals and not get something out of it as well. I mean, I've sat in sports authority meetings where literally they go to the penny. The Chiefs get 25 cents. We want our 25 cents. I mean, they're very, very focused on an absolute division, equal division of resources for their football team and the baseball team. So if someone woke up tomorrow and said, we're going to build a $750 million stadium for the Royals downtown, the Chiefs would immediately say, where's my $750? And I don't blame them for that. I mean, they don't want to be treated like second-class citizens in this space. And so now your cost is $1.5 billion minimum plus interest. The state of Missouri has no interest in contributing to local stadia projects. They showed that in St. Louis. They let the Rams go back to Los Angeles rather than pony up any money for a stadium. So I just think the practicalities of building downtown are enormous and enormously high, unless there are pots of money somewhere that I don't know about. And then as a final thing, I would say this: if Kansas City or the region has $1.5 billion to spend, I could think of better places to spend it than a new sports complex. The ones we have are actually in pretty good shape. I don't, people say, oh boy, the Royals need to go downtown so that they can increase attendance. When? That's with the years they were winning, they were packing the stadium every night. That's what and the Chiefs too. The Chiefs too. When you win, people go. When you lose, it's harder. And that seems to me a better goal than building something downtown and hoping you can sort of trick people into coming back to baseball games. So I hope, Valerie, that answered your question. I may be proved wrong, but that's how I sort of see it now. Other questions or observations?
I think if there aren't any more questions, it's about time we wrap up about right now. And we've got, I have door prize drawings, so don't leave yet. Dave, thank you so much for speaking. I've learned.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
I've learned so much from you.
I hope it wasn't too boring.
It was not boring at all. I think everyone thoroughly enjoyed listening to you. I'm going to pay a lot better attention. John LaTenzer is so good at this, and I'm going to start paying more attention to these editorials and reading things, because I know I do a lot.
Well, let me just tell your audience, and I do this in most of them, is feel free to subscribe digitally to the Star if you don't already. It's very inexpensive. And, if you want to send a note to the editor and say, Dave Helling talked me into it, that'd be good too, because they count how many subscriptions that are generated by the things that I write or everybody writes that are read by people. I mean, they're very granular. Now, I just turned 65. I'll be 66 in May of next year. So my career in this business is, I have more yesterday's than tomorrow's, is the way Bill Clinton used to put it. But it's always helpful when people subscribe. And can I just say, we need good journalism in this community. And how we do that and the way we do that is going to be under enormous assault, as it was 6 years ago when I talked to this group. But that doesn't change the need for quality reporting. It just doesn't. And communities that don't have quality reporting in the future will regret it. And the plain fact is, whether it's us or some other group, quality reporting is not free. I mean, I love what I do, but I need to make a living like everyone else. So we're going to have to figure out some model in which people can support quality reporting. We hope the Star will be it. And so, you know, if you have a few dollars left over and want to subscribe, feel free to do so. And thanks for letting me make the commercial.
Yes, and you know what? I will put that. We recap the luncheon, like I record this, and so we'll be sending that out, and I will recap that when we blast that out. But
Very kind.
Signing up digitally, and I will make sure to send a note to your editor. So
all right, great, thanks.
And I'll put that on the email.
Thanks again, Dave.
Thank you so much, John, and thanks for the invitation. Have me back again.
We'll do that.
I appreciate it.
You.
All right, guys. Well, we're gonna. I've got 2 door prizes. Let me see. I'm gonna share a picture of the one from. This is a little packet Paul Noberga put together. It's all great products in there, and so this is gonna be our first drawing. And I have everyone's names that I'm just going to move my pen around and hit a name. Oh, Daniel Reardon. Are you on still, Daniel? You have to be on to win.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, you're still here. All right. Well, and you're just down, just a little ways over. You can stop by and pick up your winnings from Central Solutions.
Sounds great. Thank you.
And then I've got one other is a $50 gift card to Rally House. And let's see. Richard Wiest. And I'm not making this up. He seems to win a lot. Richard, are you still there? Richard? You must be present to win. Going once? Going twice? Okay, I'm gonna try it. Wait. Oh, you're there. Okay, good. You just got a $3 gift card. You almost lost it. So, anyways, thank you, everyone. It was great seeing everyone's faces. And December, so originally we were going to have a happy hour at the Argosy, and they were going to provide all the drinks and food, and obviously that has been postponed because of COVID. But so we're going to do a little something different. I believe the Argosy is going to provide some holiday treat bags, and I'm working that out with them. So I will keep you posted of maybe some different snacks and treats. They have lots of good food that everyone will be able to pick up. But I'm finishing those details, so don't hold me to everything yet on that. And then Michelle from North Kansas City Hospital that spoke in January, and I forgot the topic. I should have looked it up. But Richard, do you remember what it was? Because you loved it. I know that. Michelle spoke.
Was it happiness?
It was something about happiness.
It was happiness. It was happiness.
Good job, Jake. Good job. Good memory. Yes. So she has like a follow-up to it is complaining about complaining. So we're going to tie that in with the holidays and learn how to be more grateful maybe during our holiday season. I'm going to move the event back to 11:30 instead of doing 4 o'clock. I think that seems to work better. If you guys think different, send me an email. And obviously it's pretty easy to change virtually what time we're doing this, but I think it's going to be 11:30, 12:30. I'm working on the treat bags, and Michelle will be our speaker, and we'll learn about complaining. And that's all I have. So thank you all for joining, and I'll keep everyone updated via email, and see you next month. If you need anything, let me know. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.